Tom, thank you. And thank you and congratulations for your new role in the Dean's office.
Thanks.
And thanks to Katie for setting this up. So it is summer break at Fuqua, and I think I'm going to show you Fuqua out the window here. Forgive me if I'm making you motion sick. So out the window, you can see the trees. Maybe you can see a little bit of the brutalist architecture. We're at Fuqua. It is summer break. You know what summer break means. I don't teach again until Saturday. So Saturday, I teach in the MSQM program. So if you're an alumnus of the global program, the weekend program, the MSQM program, you know that we go year round. I'm delighted to get to talk to you today about threats and opportunities in the biotech and pharma space. I have my chat open so I can see if you have comments. I also have the participants open to see if you raise hands. I'd be delighted to see some hands go up. I'd be delighted to see some comments in the chat. Worst case scenario, I'll give you some food for thought, some topics for conversation for the breakout room. So in a little more than a half an hour, you'll go into breakout rooms and you can talk about what I got right and certainly also what I got wrong. Oh, and Katie in the chat welcoming everyone. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 4 threats and 4 opportunities. Some of this will be very familiar. You'll kind of tune out a little bit, multitask a little bit, but I'll try to pull you in for at least a few of my slides. I think I've got a few interesting insights, although a lot of this will be familiar to you, especially for those of you that work in biotech and pharma. I looked at the participation list. We've got a lot of people who know the industry very well. And by the way, in terms of the participants, it also demonstrates the diversity of Fuqua and of the interest in healthcare. So many different parts of healthcare, so many different years represented. I see some of our MHA alumni from the 60s and 70s. I see all the way up to graduates from 2022. I didn't see any 2023s. Maybe I didn't look carefully enough. Maybe they weren't invited. Maybe they're a little bit worn out. Maybe they've had about enough.
I'm here.
I'm sorry. Oh, you're here. Oh, good. Okay, so we do have 23. Good. Thank you, Natasha. So I'm delighted to see 23s still have can still handle some more of this. Okay, so the 4 threats I'm going to talk about, again, many of them are familiar: cost effectiveness analysis, competition, price controls, and global supply disruptions. And then opportunities: big data, drugs for rare diseases, falling patient out-of-pocket costs. That's not something you hear in the news very much, but I'm going to show you the data. The newspaper says your out-of-pocket costs are rising. That is not the case on average. For some of you, that may be the case, but on average, it's not the case. And then rising demand. Okay, so let's go through the threats. So first, cost effectiveness analysis. Let me just sit back for a moment. Can someone put in the chat, what's an ICER? Or what is ICER, or what is an ICER? Good. Joseph says comparative effectiveness studies. That's exactly right. Can anybody tell me exactly cost per quality, says Christine? Oh, good to see Christine. I actually ran into Christine a few weeks ago. Good to see her in the chat. Good. Avastin versus Lucentis, for example, in terms of cost effectiveness. Okay, and here we have the precise definition, and that is incremental cost effectiveness ratio. That's right. Stephanie says what that means. So the acronym is incremental cost effectiveness ratio. Stephanie says it's the extra cost per the extra quality adjusted life years, the added life. Those very simply said by Stephanie, added cost per added life. That was excellent. Great start. Okay, so I already talked about the second and third bullet points. I have not mentioned the first bullet point. It's also the name of an institute that does ICERs. So there's an institute that has named itself after the incremental cost effectiveness ratio. Okay. And the British have been doing this for a long time through NICE as part of the National Health Service. This is newer in the United States through this private entity called ICER, which has really been quite influential. Okay. Threat number 2, competition. What are PBMs? Back to the chat. Good. Yep. A lot of people answering exactly the same time. Yeah, agreed, Jarrett. So 4 or 5 people simultaneously said pharmacy benefit manager, and Jarrett, who's in DC, says PBMs are the talk of DC. Actually, Jarrett, can you elaborate? Do you mind if may I cold call you, Jarrett, and ask you to elaborate on why they're the talk of Washington?
Sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Sorry, I don't have great audio in my office. Yeah, it's just a constant battle between pharma and the payers right now over PBMs. Both sides are running millions of dollars worth of television ads, battling each other. There's legislation in both the House and the Senate to take a closer look and to regulate potentially PBMs. So it's one of those things that regular folks don't really have a great understanding of, but it's definitely a hot issue in DC right now.
Well said, Jarrett. One of our alumni sent me a picture from the bus stop of a poster that said PBMs, why are you stealing money from people? Of course, that was a poster from a bus stop in Washington, DC. I think I also saw today that the PBMs are complaining that in the recent congressional hearings, they didn't get to have a voice. So PBMs very much the talk of Washington, and they need to be regulated more strictly, say some of you. And they are the reason why prices are increasing for drugs, say others. I would only amend that to say they are the reason why list prices are rising. And higher list prices for people paying out of pocket means higher prices. But for those of us with great insurance from great employers, higher list prices doesn't necessarily hit us. Okay, more on that. I've got a few more slides on PBMs. So that was a great job with the PBMs. Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And I'll build on that point about list prices and net prices in just a moment. Okay, hopefully it's totally clear to you, right? So let me grab my laser pointer here. Okay, so PBMs sit in the value chain. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. This is too much, but PBMs are collecting rebates from drug makers. They are reimbursing. They are working with retail pharmacists. Sometimes they're both pharmacist and PBM, as in the case of CVS. They are working with payers. All of this and creating formularies for beneficiaries. Yeah, and Rich says, look, we need more price transparency, and that has been one of the one of the best points made in these debates, that the payer is getting a share of the rebates, and they don't know how much of the share, because they don't know exactly how much is being paid here and then how much they're collecting. So there are a lot of people calling for more transparency. I actually kind of like the PBMs, or at least I haven't come up with anything better than the PBMs, but I do appreciate Rich's point about the lack of transparency. How much rebates are being paid here, and how much of that is actually getting passed along to, say, the employer or the insurer? Yeah, and then Alan points out, we got PBMs, we've also got group purchasing organizations that make things even less transparent. Okay, so there's really 3 big PBMs. There's CVS, there's Express Scripts, and there's Optum. You can see that 3 PBMs control almost all the market. That's a good thing in the sense that they have a credible threat to make to the manufacturers. If you don't pay us a rebate, you're going to lose a quarter of your business, of your commercial business. That's a really powerful threat to make. Now, so It's good in the sense that it makes them a strong negotiator with manufacturers. It's bad in that it makes them a strong negotiator with us or our employers. It's potentially also good that it makes it a strong negotiator with pharmacists, unless you worry about the small family pharmacies. Yeah, okay, that's right. Great point by Kim. So we should, I talk about commercial insurers, but as you know, Medicare Part D is administered by commercial insurers. So it's really beyond, we should think beyond just, we should include seniors in this as well. Yeah, and Andrew says, look, most of the rebates are getting passed along. 90% of the rebates are getting passed along, on average, according to Steve Miller from Express Scripts. And I believe that. So, but nevertheless, there's definitely payers out there, employers out there that feel like they're maybe not getting a fair shake and would like to have more transparency. You guys are too good. I'm having trouble keeping up. Okay, and so what do PBMs do? To some extent, they say no. So they say, if you're, let's see, I have here at Duke employees have Express Scripts, which is part of Cigna. So we can have Eli Lilly's insulin. We can't have Novo Nordisk's insulin, or we can have it, but we have to pay for it out of pocket. So Lilly's insulin is on formulary, it's covered. Novo's is not. You see the same thing is true with Optum. Express Scripts and Optum look the same. CVS is different. So you see that Novo is on formulary for CVS and Lilly is on formulary for Express Scripts and Optum. I think that's an interesting way of splitting the market. It is a little awkward that there's three, but remember that CVS has the biggest share. So it looks like, okay, CVS has got about this much, Express Scripts and Optum that much. It looks like they're kind of splitting the market 50-50. In terms of Lilly and Novo Nordisk. I think that's a kind of an interesting equilibrium they've settled into. Lilly has disrupted things a little bit by saying effectively that they're really not going to pay rebates. And it'll be interesting, and they're going to go with a low net price and not a high list price and not pay the rebates. And so far, it looks like their competitors are going to go along. We'll see about that. Yeah, okay. And so there's some discussion, Alan and Andrew, about, so if your employer is getting those rebates, are those actually being passed along to you, the beneficiary? Okay, you can see that, so these are examples of PBMs saying no to us. You can see that PBMs have become more and more aggressive about saying no. 10 years ago, they said no to about 100 drugs. Today, they say no to about 700 drugs. So they've been more and more aggressive about using this mechanism to extract rebates from drug makers. Okay, we've been talking about this. This came up almost immediately when you said they drive up list prices, but net prices have largely been flat. So this is a study of insulin showing that rebates have been massive and the list price has been pretty flat. What Lilly has done recently is said, we're going to price here. We're going to bring our list price down to here. We're going to price at what we're at our net price. And they're hoping that Novo will go along with that. If Novo decides not to go along with that, Novo could potentially steal Express Scripts and Optum from Lilly. So we'll see how that plays out. Okay. So that was competition. And I really used the way that competition is leveraged in the US market is really through the pharmacy benefit managers. So that's why I want to talk about PBMs. Let's talk about price controls. For the most part, there have been very few price controls in the United States until now. So the Inflation Reduction Act from last year created drug price controls. These price controls kick in earlier in the life cycle for small molecule drugs than for large molecule biologics. What are they going to do? They're going to create smaller blockbusters. So some of the top selling drugs will become a little less lucrative. There was a paper by Aaron Kesselheim and colleagues projecting that this would save maybe about 5% on drug spending overall. So they did some analysis. What if this law were in place for some drugs a few years ago? How much would have been saved? Okay, maybe we should expect something similar today. And maybe more importantly, they created a precedent. Hey, Congress can put in price controls. For a long time, Congress wouldn't use price controls. Now they've opened the door for it, opportunity for more expansion of price controls. That's a threat for the pharmaceutical industry. Finally, global supply disruptions. You can see a lot of our drugs are coming from other countries, especially Mexico, China, India, Canada. This was remarkably resilient during COVID-19. Now, you can definitely point to examples where countries closed their borders and wouldn't let the COVID vaccine out. But for the most part, the global market worked. Yeah, okay. So Tanner asked, is this API? This is just data on the weight of drugs coming in the United States. It's weird to measure it by weight. That's why you kind of think, oh, it must be active pharmaceutical ingredients, says Tanner. This is just drugs. What's a better metric of drug imports than weight by kilograms? You could do liquid weights, but that's a very small portion of imports. You could do dollar values, but then that would really overweight the branded drugs. So I just did kilograms, and this is not just APIs. This is not just ingredients, although, as you know, a lot of the ingredients come from China and some from India. But this is drugs. There's a lot of generic drugs coming from India in the world. India is the generic drug producer for the world. And Mexico and Canada are our neighbors, major trade partners. Yeah, we definitely had a lot of worries during COVID. I agree with you, Edward, that there were some anxious moments. And part of the response to that, the Biden administration has said we'd like to have more drugs made in the United States. Part of that's a COVID response, although we did pretty well in COVID. Yeah. So actually, yeah, Dr. Reddy, one of the major global manufacturers of generic drugs. So I thought we did pretty well. COVID was a major disruption, and we did pretty well. But China is a global political rival, and so there are reasons to worry about products being made abroad. We have a paper we're working on right now about drug inspections, and the FDA. Well, I hope that paper will be coming out in December. Stay tuned for a paper about foreign drug inspections and health affairs in December. I hope. We'll see. Okay, those are the threats: cost effectiveness analysis, competition, price controls, and global supply disruptions. Let's do opportunities. Big data. Several of you are going to want to talk about big data. I like talking about big data. We'll talk some about big data. I also like talking about drugs for rare diseases. I want to show you that patient out-of-pocket costs have been falling despite what you read in the news, and that demand is rising because the world's getting richer and insurance is expanding and demand is rising. Yeah, it's a fair point about the complexity. So back to this point about the global supply chain, it is becoming more complex, no doubt. Yeah, that's right. And this is about drugs, especially generic drugs, but it applies more broadly in healthcare and manufacturing more broadly. Okay, let's talk big data. Oh yeah, so here's in the chat also Ozempic, which semaglutide, which is one of these miracle obesity drugs. There's not enough of it to meet demand right now, and that's why some countries might be inclined to close their borders. We here in the Triangle are going to help out with the supply of the obesity drugs. Lilly is setting up some more manufacturing right here in the Research Triangle Park for Mounjaro. Okay, so big data. Real world, big data is useful for real world evidence. Try to say that fast. Real world evidence. So the data, say from insurance claims, has a variety of uses, and from wearables, is useful for potentially for product approval. Potentially. The FDA still doesn't love real world evidence. They prefer evidence from randomized clinical trials. Why? It may be that a certain type of person uses a drug. If just healthy people choose this drug, they're going to get good outcomes. Is it because of the drug, or is it because they're healthy people? We don't know without a randomized controlled trial. We can get some signals in real world evidence, but FDA is still going to really prefer the randomized controlled trial to account for the unobserved heterogeneity, the unobserved differences in the people. Are healthy people more likely to use this drug than that drug? Then the healthy might be driving rather than the drug. Okay, also useful for payers in terms of demonstrating cost effectiveness. We led off today asking you what an ICER is, what cost effectiveness is. You need data not just for regulators, you need data for insurers to show that it's worth the money. Big data can be used for improving R&D to identify potential drug targets and to help you find patients. Where are the patients or where are the doctors who have patients with this disease, with this rare disease? Where are they? How can we find them? How can we enroll them in our clinical trials? And what's the sort of patient type that would most benefit from the drug? Well, just let's only enroll patients that are going to benefit the drug in our trials. Yeah, I mentioned, so back to the chat, I mentioned real world evidence for the regulators. I mentioned the payers. A payer I should mention is the National Health Service. So in the chat, you see that NICE is the cost effectiveness agency of the National Health Service, struggling to leverage real world evidence versus randomized controlled trials. Okay, a key here is that artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are not magic. They're trained on data. If you put in garbage data, you're going to get garbage results out. You need good data. I think something that is not sufficiently appreciated is that this is driven by data, and not everybody has access to the data. Who has access to good data? Big companies? Verily is Google Health's health arm, part of Alphabet, which has been just, obviously Google has data, but Verily has also been grabbing data and grabbing capabilities. We have actually, you're all Duke alumni. We have a bunch of Duke alumni who've gone through Verily. Rob Califf, who's now FDA head, came through Verily. Amy Abernathy went from Duke to FDA to Verily. Brad Hirsch, his company was acquired by Verily. Lots of, and Brad is a Fuqua alumnus as well. Lots of Fuqua people there, and I'm excited about that. And actually maybe some of you on the call as well. Frankly, Verily hasn't done anything so far. Verily's been around a long time, has done nothing. But, I mean, a few things. But there are potentially big things to come because they have the data. So you can have the smartest computer programmers, but if they don't have good data to train their models on, they got nothing. So I think this is kind of an underappreciated point. Who has the data? Okay, so you know, what kind of data are useful? The answer is always it depends, right? But you know, ideally you have both claims data, but also chart data. Claims data are easy. Insurers have data in easy formats. The government will sell you some data in an easy format. That's the claims, insurance claims data are easy. Much harder are the chart data. What the doctor is saying about your condition, what notes the doctor is saying about your condition. The whole business model of Flatiron, which Amy Abernathy was a part of, was, hey, cancer doctors, we're going to give you some software, and in return, we're going to get your data. And the data were messy and ugly, and they sent the data off for humans to clean it up. And so that's another thing to bear in mind, that often the data are just a mess, and they used humans to clean up the data. More and more, presumably, we can use artificial intelligence, although we're not quite there yet. So ideally, claims data and chart data, and even beyond that, data from clinical trials about, we tried to hit this target, we tried to hit that target, it failed or it succeeded. And I'm focused here on data needs in the industry, in the pharma industry. There's certainly applications well beyond it. Yeah, you know, and then veracity, integrity of the data. Yeah, are the data any good? Is it garbage in or garbage out? And another question is, can you merge the data? Is there information in this data set and that data set that facilitates a merge for the full analysis? I think some of the expectations, I think maybe we're here with some of these technologies. We were certainly here with IBM Watson a few years ago. People thought, oh, IBM Watson's magic. The expectations far exceeded the actual. It was a bust. I think expectations came down with the, I'm going to say failure of IBM Watson, or failure of IBM Watson to deliver the magical results that people like at Sloan Kettering and others expected. I think expectations fell a little bit just as the actual capabilities got better. So remember, this stuff's not magic. It depends on having good data, but there are some folks out there with good data. Yeah, thoughts on large language models reading and interpreting charts. Yeah, I think the capabilities are amazing. I'll talk. So I think the tools, for example, that oh, okay, let me think of it. So I was thinking there are two types of charts. Those things are the charts that radiologists are reading, and the charts data that I was just talking about, the Flatiron cleaned up. 2 years ago, it was not capable. 2 years from now, it will be capable. And I don't know exactly where we are today. So we had some really messy FDA data that we were trying to use, and we were using artificial intelligence and machine learning to try to clean up these data. And it was largely a bust. Largely, we would have been better off doing it by hand. So 2 years ago, we didn't have the capabilities. 2 years from now, we will. I'm not sure exactly where we are now. And Edward has a link here to a website. Okay, so I use ChatGPT every day. I did purchase the subscription to it, and I asked ChatGPT what topics I missed. I told it I'm doing these 4 threats and these 4 opportunities. It said I should have had digital health and telemedicine, and I agree. I didn't add it because I kind of wanted a clean 4 and 4 that actually link together. I'll show you that in a minute. But it is a ChatGPT is right. This is a topic I should have included in my opportunities. I'm fascinated by companies like Roman that will sell you and Hims and Hers that will sell you talk to a doc by telemedicine and get a prescription for a drug. I think that's super interesting for pharma companies that you can cut out. Now, a lot of that's cash pay. So I don't know how well this works with insurers, but I think it's really interesting to make it easier for patients to get the medicines that they might or might not need. Great for mental health, telemedicine, 100%. I agree. It feels like, okay, now be careful, Kevin. I agree. Kevin says we've been 2 years away for a long time. I get it. But be careful. Don't be like me, because so often I get here and I say, oh boy, IBM Watson was a bust. And my expectations just fall really low. And then I wake up and we're there. So there's a danger, Kevin, in being sort of too informed that you've seen all of these failures. For example, I was way pessimistic about how fast we would get a COVID vaccine. I'd seen companies take forever and struggle forever. I'd seen the mRNA technology fail and fail and fail. mRNA technology, are you kidding me? Moderna, are you kidding me? Moderna's never succeeded at anything. In the past with vaccines, they've taken forever. And my expectations for getting a vaccine were way down here, and the actual was way up here. The mRNA technology worked and saved the world. So be careful. If you're too aware of all the past failures, I think you might be down here with me and get surprised when it passes you by. And in fact, ChatGPT blew me away. That really surprised me. Okay, drugs for rare diseases. I already showed you this slide. I said with insulin, you've got Lilly and Novo fighting to get on the CVS formulary, the Express Scripts formulary, the Optum formulary. But if you're a drug for a rare disease, you're probably the only drug in your class, probably got no competition. PBM can't say no. I mean, I guess they can. I mean, if your price is maybe above $400,000 per patient per year, but for the most part, the PBM is going to want to put you on formulary because they don't, the PBM and your PBM and your employer don't want to show up in the news as being the evil people that that blocked a sick kid from getting a drug. They don't want to be on the front page of the New York Times. So they're probably going to say yes to you. And so the beauty of being in the rare disease space is this: PBMs can't say no to you. If you're in the insulin space, it's a good chance they're going to say no or extract big rebates. If you're in the rare disease space, you're probably going to be on formulary unless you're just really high with that price and just not cost effective. I'm not keeping up on the chat. I'm going to keep going and come back to the chat and catch up in just a moment. Lower patient out-of-pocket costs. So here is U.S. prescription drug spending for the last 20 years. You see it's rising. I'm going to carve out these bottom bars. You see these bars at the bottom? I'm just going to carve those out. So you see that went up to $50 billion or so. I'm just going to carve those out and let you look at this. So these are U.S. government data, national health expenditures data. You can make this chart in 15 minutes. You just Google national health expenditures, pull the data down from the CMS website, make a nice pretty picture. I was super lazy. I did not adjust for inflation. I did not adjust for population growth. This is not per capita or anything like this. This is just total. What I want you to see here is, and this is mostly retail. I don't think they do a great job of picking up all of the provider administered drugs. So there's probably some chemotherapy I'm not picking up here. But this is what your US government says is spending out of pocket on prescription drugs. And what I want you to see is it's flat. This and if you account for rising population, if you account for inflation, it's falling. The average American is spending less out of pocket for drugs than she did 20 years ago, or at least, let's do 20 years ago in 2003. You don't read that in the news. That's not, newspaper publishers want to shock you and annoy you and offend you rather than say, maybe things aren't that bad. Now, certainly there are uninsured patients. There are patients who are on a lot of medications that are suffering. I don't mean to understate the suffering of some people. But what I want to say is, on average, insurers, the government, are not raising your out-of-pocket costs. And so what I want to say is that's potentially good news for you, pharma company, because people are not, now there are definitely people out there that are suffering. I don't mean to say that, but on average, as a whole, this is kind of good news for you, patient. And in fact, it's going to go down further for some Medicare beneficiaries. So in 2024, Congress is capping Medicare Part D out of pocket, reducing the sort of the catastrophic phase, capping prices. There are all these creating inflation penalties that penalize companies that raise drug prices faster than inflation. Congress is putting all these things in effect that is going to make this go down even further. Also, demand is rising. Why is demand rising? Because insurance is expanding in part. North Carolina just voted to expand Medicaid. So I actually updated this slide this morning because I had to account for the fact that some new states have expanded Medicaid. So very few states have not implemented the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion. And this is slowly creeping south. You see more and more southern states implementing Medicaid expansion. I would expect more to follow. So insurance is expanding. That's good news for a lot of patients. That's good news for a lot of people in healthcare. We're getting richer. Here's a few major markets for pharmaceuticals. These are the biggest markets for you, drug maker, and people in these countries are getting richer. And this is adjusting for purchasing power parity and constant prices. So rising insurance, falling copays, rising insurance, rising incomes, all good for you, pharma company. And even better if you make quality products and are concerned about sustainability. As a society gets richer, people tend to turn more toward wanting to make the planet better, wanting better quality products that they can trust. So that's also good news for you if those are parts of your business. Okay, I gave you 4 threats. I gave you 4 opportunities. I've fallen behind in the chat. I'll catch up in just a moment. Those are the only comments I have. We've got 5 minutes for me to catch up on the chat, for you to raise your hand, and or we can go more quickly into the breakout rooms where you can get in a group of say 8 people and discuss some of these threats and opportunities, what we got wrong, what we got right, what we omitted. Dave.
Hey, thanks for doing this. So Dave Torres, I don't think we've met. I'm the Chief Analytics Officer at Centera Healthcare, just north of you, up in Virginia. So on your cost slide, I put the question in the chat, but I wanted to ask. So you know the out of pocket for prescriptions is very visible and sensitive to a lot of people. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if insurance companies who bear the brunt of this, the ire of patients, because they're the next one up the line, are burying these costs and premiums, right? So when you do your analysis of costs on out of pocket, so fine, out of pocket isn't going up, but premiums are. So, you know, is that real? I mean, my expectation, what I see is the premiums are going up, and that's where it's getting all buried. We're paying for it. We're just not paying for it nickel and dime out of pocket.
That's super well said, Dave. I wish I would have. I wish I would have said that. So, 100%. So here you see drug spending rising. If it's not coming in out of pocket costs, it's coming in your taxes and it's coming in your insurance premiums and the insurance premiums that your employer is paying on your behalf, which are effectively coming out of your pocket. So all of this spending is coming from you, either in taxes, lower paychecks, or higher insurance premiums. That's very well said. Dave, I wish I would have said that. In fact, I wrote myself a note, say higher premiums.
Can I give you a sidebar question real quick too? So
yeah, please.
I noticed your income was mean, not median. And so I'm curious, like, as we see the distribution change, I mean, it does seem to feed into, you know, more higher cost drugs for narrower populations targeted at richer, high-end people is a winning strategy for pharma. And I'm curious, like, what that, you know, I haven't looked at it, what it looks like when you look at median versus mean, but I wonder if that's moving as quickly in the same direction.
Yeah, it's a fabulous point. So why mean rather than median? If your goal is to talk about what we as a society can afford, what the United States can afford, then I think you want to use means, because that's the resources our government has, our employers have to bring to the problem. So if the question is what can your societies or what can your employers afford, then mean is right. If your question is what can individuals afford, then median is right. So it depends on your question. If you're worried that there are some individuals, especially people who are uninsured, if we're worried about the uninsured, then it's really median that matters. If we're worried about what Medicare can afford, what a commercial insurer provided by your employer can afford, then it's mean that matters. So that's I'll take that amendment also. That when I talk about mean, I should also talk about median. I agree. Okay, I'm not going to catch up on the chat. Atia?
Hey, good to see you. Fuqua class of 18. I was interested in your thoughts on the potential impact and utility of artificial intelligence, and if there's any companies to watch in that space.
Yeah, so who should we watch in AI? It's a great question. I think it's the companies that have access to good data. So I saw a presentation from an interesting company a couple months ago, and they had early access to OpenAI's platforms. They had early access to ChatGPT and did some cool things and built a business model around it. And they are built on good coders and also checking in with doctors. You want good coder. I guess you want 3 things. You want good coders, you want doctors that are going to double check the results that the AI is spitting out, and you want good data. They had all 3, but then everybody had the good data. So they briefly had early access to ChatGPT, and so they built a really cool business around that, but then everybody got ChatGPT. So what they have now is good coders and docs, but everybody actually has good coders and docs. And now everybody has that data. So I think they're actually not special anymore. So I think what you want to look for is who has access to special data, because I think the coders and the docs are commoditized. The data are not. So I'm very interested in the companies that have this relationship, say with the drug company that has the data, with Google that has the data. So when you're evaluating these companies, or maybe I guess one more possibility is first mover advantage. If it's a company that's been in, say, the diagnostics business or the clinical trials business, and they have access to the data from some first mover advantage, that's also real too. But the way I want you to evaluate these companies is, what data do you have that others don't have, and why does that create a moat for you? I am hopelessly behind on the chat. I'm going to read your chat while we go to the breakout room. So let me hand things back, because you guys want to check in with each other and talk about these things in small groups. So let me hand it back to Katie and team for the breakout rooms. I think you can tell I had a great time. Thank you very much.